Well, we're back with Dr. Deanna Dye, and she is explaining to me the meaning of my name, which is in English is Elizabeth. So we're going to continue with this. Would you?
Okay. Well, your Hebrew name is Elisheva.
Uh-huh.
And Elisheva can be broken down into two parts, Eli and Sheva. Eli can be my God,
All right.
and Sheva is a seventh or a rest or the Sabbath. So your name really means my God is rest.
What a blessing.
It's a beautiful name.
Yes. I was telling you on break that it makes my day to really understand my name because names have such great meaning.
Well, and that's the key in Scripture. You cannot study a portion of Scripture, especially when you're in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, without looking at the meaning of the name. Otherwise, you miss a whole dimension of what the Scripture's saying.
Okay. So can you just tell us now exactly what you do? This show today, I wanted to emphasize women who are on the move, whether it's in the United States or overseas. What exactly do you do now with the Foundations in Torah?
Well, Foundations in Torah is a website. It's a membership-based website, and I have all my teachings up there. So people can join
Good.
for various price ranges through the month, and they can listen to my teachings. And from that, I also do conferences, mostly in the United States, although we're looking at doing some conferences overseas. I have a dear friend who's looking at bringing me over to Singapore and Hong
Good.
Kong and
Oh, my goodness.
Borneo. So there's a real hunger amongst the Chinese people for this.
Really?
So I also minister to small groups. I've written a workbook on how to study from
Good.
this approach,
Okay.
and I'm working on a new book about the temple. So I'm pretty busy and traveling a lot, but it's been fulfilling, rewarding beyond measure.
So when you travel, tell us some of the places you've been.
Well, mostly in the
In the
United
States.
States, yeah. I've done conferences in Albuquerque, actually,
Yes.
in Texas and Florida. I go to Nashville regularly to film. South Carolina, I've done some California. I've got a conference coming up there, as well as up in the Oregon area. So mostly coast to coast.
And you mentioned the Chinese people and their interest. Any
There's a-
particular reason that is it most recently that this is
Just
happening?
really I think it's probably, it's because of the Chinese letters, how they
Yeah,
have the
okay,
same
yes, I
meaning.
see that.
So they understand that Hebrew functions the same way.
Okay.
And they don't have to go through the filter of United States American Christianity. They can go directly to understanding the Hebrew roots without that Western culture to influence them.
Okay.
So they're hungry. They are excited and hungry about this.
So their language is in pictures.
Yes.
Well, could we say that as the Hebrew language?
Yes, the
is in
original
pictures?
Hebrew language, the Paleo-Hebrew, is all pictures.
Is Japanese? Isn't it similar?
Similar, not the letters are not as complex as they are in Chinese.
Oh.
Yes, but it's a
Okay.
similar thing. So there's a hunger there, so I'm very excited about that opportunity.
Okay. Now, since you teach Torah foundations,
Yes.
I often hear of Torah portions that every week we have a different portion?
Yes, well now, in today's culture, under Rabbinic Judaism, if you
Okay.
will, the 5 books of the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, are divided into little sections.
Okay.
So you would start reading after Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. That's when the new annual cycle would begin. And each week, on the Sabbath, the Shabbat, you would read a portion of the Torah. And it would only be a few chapters. And so it would take you an entire year to go from Genesis all the way through Deuteronomy.
Oh, a year.
Yes.
When often Christians are saying they read the whole Bible throughout the year.
Right.
But the Torah, it's a year.
Yes, well, now back at the time of Yeshua, Jesus, the Torah portions were divided into 3.5 years. It would take you
Really?
3.5 years to go through the entire cycle, Genesis to Deuteronomy. So the portions would be very small, but imagine how much studying you could do and how much you could pull out of that.
Now, what is the portion coming up?
The Torah portion coming up is from Numbers, basically Numbers 4 through 6, chapters 4 through 6, and it's called Naso, which means to lift up or to raise up.
Oh, I like that. To lift up or to raise up.
Yes.
So the scriptures will relate to that.
Yes,
in some way.
everything will go along with that particular topic. So you have a Torah portion. Now you also have a portion from the prophets that match, which is in the Torah portion. It's called the Haftorah. And then you can also find something that'll match in the New Testament to the same Torah portion.
Okay.
So a lot of people do that as they're reading. So this particular one is dealing a lot with the priesthood. It also has in it the story, what we call the sotah, or the woman caught in the act of adultery.
Okay.
It gives you all the regulations for a woman in that position. So that, of course, relates to
Wow.
the woman caught in the act of adultery with Yeshua. And you can see significance there.
That story has always been interesting to me
Yes.
because there are some parts that we don't understand about Yeshua writing on the ground.
Correct.
And I suppose a lot of people have interjected what they thought was happening. Does the Hebrew tradition in the studies tell us anything about what he might have been writing?
Well, there's a couple of theories. The most predominant theory is that he was writing the names of the people that we're accusing. But actually, in looking at the Hebrew, I think more likely he was writing the names of the idols.
Interesting.
Yes. I think that's more correct. And we can't prove it,
Right,
obviously.
I know we don't know.
But it's interesting that there's a whole ceremony that goes with the woman caught in the act of adultery. And one of the things is they would take the dirt that was inside the temple, and they would mix it in a jar of water. And if she was caught and she refused to recant in any way, or if she declared her innocence, she was forced to drink the bitter waters. And it would cause her stomach to distend, and if there was a baby living in there, the baby would die. This was one of the most humiliating ceremonies that a
Had to
woman had to
been.
go through in the temple. And so Yeshua's relating all this. My theory on that story, now this is
Okay.
just an opinion,
Okay, I get it.
is that she represents all of us.
Okay.
She represents what we would call Israel. Israel is the bride.
Yes.
And she is the adulterous bride, just the way Israel was all the way through as we read all the portions through, from Genesis really all through the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Israel is seen as the adulterous woman, going out from under her relationship with God. And I think the adulterous woman there represents Israel.
Okay.
And that Yeshua's writing in the ground the idols that she had joined herself with through the
That is-
centuries.
That's a powerful revelation. Now you mentioned the temple, so you do have some pictures from Israel.
Okay.
So
yes.
we can't have you on the show without showing something connected.
Yes,
to
I go to Israel
Okay.
quite a bit.
You do?
At least
Okay.
once a year. And in fact, we're going to take a tour to Israel, just
Okay.
dealing with the temple. But we travel all over the country
All
from
right,
Dan
so
to
let's see
Beersheba.
what we have
Well, this
here.
is one of my favorite. Now, this is at the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. You can see
Mm-hmm.
the walls that go around the city. And there's
Okay.
a spring stone on the wall. You can kind of see the remains of it. That would have been where Robinson's Arch was at the time of Yeshua. And all of that there are just, that's the archaeology. They've advanced this from this slide, but you can see when the Romans invaded and destroyed the temple walls, all of the rocks fell down on the pavement there. And you can see those giant boulders. So that was one of the main entrances into the whole temple complex
Okay.
there, yeah.
So do we have another image that we can share at this time?
Sure, yeah. Now this would be in the same position. I was trying to get the dimension. You know, when we think of a wall around the city or around
Yeah.
a temple, we just sort of think of some little wall, but this thing's almost 100 feet.
Oh,
So
really?
you stand at the bottom and you're looking up, and then you can see how it goes in. It's not straight. There's an angle, so with each level it would become smaller and smaller. It was not a straight line. So, and then we have this thing called mixed use, where various, like for instance at the time of the Crusaders or the Mamelukes, they would take old archaeology, the old rocks, and put it back. But it would be out of its proper time frame.
Yes.
So it's hard to tell, you know, that the time frame is everything in archaeology. So you
Yes,
see the
I
wall,
love
you see
it,
Herodian
archaeology.
stone at the bottom, Crusader stone, you know, using the Crusader time period at the top. It's quite interesting.
Archaeology has always been interesting to me. Okay, any more slides we can look at today?
I think we probably have a couple more we can take
Okay.
a look at. It's
All right.
up to you.
Okay.
So this is the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron. Hebron is a very special place because this is where the patriarchs and the matriarchs are buried, except for Rachel. She was buried on the road to Ephrat. This is another
With the-
view then of the tomb of the patriarchs. This was built by King Herod in the
Okay.
first century. And so they are actually buried in tunnels underneath the tomb of the patriarchs there.
So interesting. Any last words you could leave for us? Could you pray, give us a closing prayer in Hebrew? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no,
but
that's okay.
I'd love
I
to
was
hear
just
that.
thinking, you know, there's an expression, Baruch haba Hashem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord from Psalm 118. And so we look for his return and we say, Baruch haba Hashem Adonai.
That's such a blessing, Dr. Deanna. Thank you so much for
My
being with us
pleasure.
today, and you must come back.
I will.
All right.